Hi, I'm John Malos. Welcome to this live edition of Connect with Me on the showroom floor at Ventura TV on this Wednesday morning. Glad you're here. Today we're talking about a very important topic, and I mean it is truly critical. 436-MeTV option 11. The main topic of conversation is human trafficking. We'll get your comments. Connect with Me starts right now.
Tonight I want to discuss the importance of the television medium to the American people.
Back here on the program on Connect with Me on MeTV Fresno. It is Wednesday morning. We're midweek, and before I get into the program here, I got a note. Tomorrow's guest is going to be here talking about going to the chiropractor. She is a chiropractor, been in business for quite some time, and we'll talk to her about the do's and don'ts. What do you look for when you are looking to get all fixed up by that chiropractor? And then on Friday, we have a special guest, a first-time guest, David Mugridge. You realize David Mugridge has been a defense attorney here in the city of Fresno for what, more than 30 years. And I've known him for about 20 years, and I've never had him on this program before. So it'll be a first-time guest. We'll talk about all sorts of things, including the Keith Foster case. At some point, he's going to be sentenced, the former deputy police chief here in the city of Fresno. So we got that on tap. And then everybody right now is talking about the Dodgers. I know, could be the Dodgers and the Yankees in the World Series. Hasn't happened since 1981. Remember, 77, 78, and 81 they met. So we'll see if it happens again this year. But the Dodgers are rolling. They'll probably take the Cubs. Who knows? Maybe tonight. We'll have to see. For now, you're watching us live on Comcast Channel 375. As usual, it's a live television program, call-in show, if you will, 10 to 11 o'clock in the morning. And if you don't have Comcast cable, it's quite all right. 13.1, 43.6 over-the-air broadcast with a digital antenna. And then the replay comes up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's 13.6 YouTube, 8 o'clock tonight, 4.6 Biz TV. After that, you can get on your iPad, your iPhone, your iThis, your iThat, and go to venturabroadcasting.com and click on to Connect with Me. And you'll see all of our shows on YouTube, obviously dating back to 2012, or at least most of them, if not all of them. Some of them have been banned for I don't know what reason. It's like really ridiculous. This is a clean show. I don't know why they would ban anything. Anyway, you can do that at any time of day or night. So today's topic is human trafficking, and it's been called modern day slavery. We've talked about this on the program before a couple of years ago. Actually, we've talked about it a couple of times on this program. People being exploited for sex, people being exploited for profit, for money, whatnot. They use force, they use coercion, they use manipulation 24 hours a day. Not only are victims being victimized all over the globe, some 20 million, but right here in the United States, right here in the state of California. In fact, just yesterday, roughly 277 suspects were arrested in a major sting that took place down in Florida. You had some doctors, you had some sheriff deputies that were all involved in this arrest. They were the perpetrators. They were actually arrested. And of course, most recently in San Antonio, the driver of a tractor trailer that was going through South Texas back in July, he pleaded guilty to human trafficking yesterday in court for the incident that took place in July. And we want to bring you that report as it appeared on NBC Nightly News just a few months ago. Check it out.
Federal prosecutors say James Bradley Jr. is the 60-year-old trucker who drove undocumented immigrants to a stifling end. Tonight, 10 are dead after San Antonio police found 39 of them, including teenagers, trapped in this tractor trailer.
It's dangerous, putting, somebody's life at risk. These smugglers, they're callous.
New court documents reveal Bradley told investigators he was driving the truck from Iowa to Brownsville, Texas, but had stopped in Laredo to get it washed and detailed. He said he was unaware of the contents until he stopped at this Walmart parking lot to use the restroom. When he opened the back door, he said he was knocked to the ground by some of those who escaped. He said he then noticed bodies lying on the floor like meat. The gruesome scene unfolding as temperatures reached triple digits on Saturday. Authorities interviewed some of the survivors who said they started taking turns breathing from the only ventilation hole. Court documents say they'd paid smugglers and others linked to the Zetas drug cartel to help them cross into the U.S. One survivor from Mexico owed the smugglers $5,500. This dramatic police body camera video from 2015 in Texas shows the desperate conditions. Dozens of undocumented immigrants gasping for air, rescued just in time. A 13-year-old boy among the survivors.
And they're willing to risk their lives for their kids and for their family members.
Last year, federal officials investigated more than 2,000 cases of human trafficking.
It's a symptom of a broken immigration system, which Congress has refused to fix.
Don't waste your money.
But Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly says there's been a sharp drop in border arrests since February, and he argues the Trump administration's illegal immigration crackdown isn't deterring. Investigators say at one point nearly 100 people were crammed inside that tractor trailer. Tonight, at least 20 are still hospitalized. If convicted, the driver faces up to life in prison or even the death penalty.
Just simply unbelievable. Well, live in our studio to talk about all this during the course of the program and other things is Bishop David Rice of the Episcopal Diocese of San Joaquin. He's here to talk about human trafficking, gun violence, incarceration, immigration, any other topic he wishes to speak on this day on Connect with Me, MeTV Fresno, 436 MeTV option 11. By the way, just to add up to that NBC report that aired in July on Nightly News, the people that were inside that tractor trailer, some were found dead, as you know, 10 people. They were banging on the side of the walls, trying to make noise, trying to get the driver's attention. Of course, you saw that report. He stopped at Walmart. He came out of the truck. He was nearly trampled. He claims he didn't know they were in there, so he refused to stop until he had to stop at Walmart. Just an amazing story. And then what about the 277 people arrested in Florida yesterday? We'll talk about that too. It's an ongoing issue. In fact, the Trump administration has addressed this issue. We'll get a soundbite later in the program from Rex Tillerson, Secretary of State, and also the President Donald Trump. You'll hear from him. Back in just a moment here on a Wednesday morning.
When you're looking for KitchenAid innovation and quality, who has the answers, the selection, the price? Ventura TV Appliance. With billions in nationwide appliance buying power, more than Home Depot and Best Buy combined, we'll help you save. Our low prices on Energy Star qualified KitchenAid appliances save you energy and money and pay no interest on select models when paid in full within 12 months. Ventura TV Appliance, serving you since 1951. Ventura TV Appliance Center. We're the save energy, save time, save money place. The Energy Star qualified #1 rated high efficiency Cabrio from Whirlpool Place. You heard right. Right now, save big on select Whirlpool Cabrio laundry pairs and pay no interest when paid in full within 6 months. At the hometown low price, think outside the big box place. Since 1951, Ventura TV Appliance Center. We're working hard to be your place.
Incredibly, our challenge is enormous. Today, globally, it's estimated that there are 20 million victims of human trafficking. So clearly, we have a lot of work to do, and governments around the world have a lot of work to do. As with other forms of illicit crime, human trafficking is becoming more nuanced and more difficult to identify. Much of these activities are going underground, and they're going online. And China was downgraded to Tier 3 status in this year's report, in part because it has not taken serious steps to end its own complicity in trafficking, including forced laborers from North Korea that are located in China. American consumers and businesses must also recognize they may have an unwitting connection to human trafficking. Supply chains creating many products that Americans enjoy may be utilizing forced labor. The State Department does engage with businesses to alert them to these situations so that they can take actions on their own to ensure that they are not in any way complicit.
As Secretary Tillerson noted earlier, ending human trafficking is a major foreign policy priority for the Trump administration. Over the past several months, the White House has hosted roundtables and listening sessions with victims, with NGOs, members of Congress, and others to determine steps we can take to better execute a strategy to finally end human trafficking. On a personal level, as a mother, This is much more than a policy priority. It is a clarion call to action in defense of the vulnerable, the abused, and the exploited.
Okay, so Rex Tillerson, Ivanka Trump talking about human trafficking, and Rex Tillerson mentioned about 80,000 North Koreans working in China and Russia. They left out the country of Russia, but they're working in construction, mining, processing jobs. I want to welcome in Bishop David Rice, return guest here on the program. Good morning, Bishop. Let me ask you a question. You heard Ivanka Trump say this is a major concern, a major priority for the Trump administration. You follow this a lot more closely than I do. Is the Trump administration really focused on this major issue? In your estimation,
well, firstly,
in your judgment.
It's good to be back, John. I want to say this. I'm not going to answer for the administration. I have a long laundry list of difficulties with this present administration. The fact that it's being discussed is hugely important. The problem I had with the Tillerson clip and the subsequent clip from Trump's daughter is that focusing on borders and focusing on foreign policy is only part of addressing this issue. This is also a highly important domestic issue. A lot of the people who are trafficked, both sex and labor trafficked, come within the borders of this United States. And that doesn't go within that framework. That's a whole nother discussion. What I'd like to do here is congratulate you for raising awareness, because that's the first order of business. And I need to back up just for a second, John, to say something about from whence I come and the diocese I represent. The Episcopal Diocese of San Joaquin split 8 years ago over issues of human sexuality, which is another narrative. So what that means is over the last 8 years, and this is really prior to my 3.5 years of being here, it has been treading water and not engaged with issues of the day. Prior to that split 8 years ago, it was working in isolationism. So some of the things that you and I are going to discuss today have really never been addressed by the diocese I've inherited. I hope that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So what that has meant is over the last 3.5 years, since our arrival from New Zealand, we have focused on the larger context. And we're going to cover some of that today. It has included human trafficking. It has included our sisters and brothers who live on the streets. We have more homeless people in this agrarian landscape in which we live than is even one would think possible. We're going to talk about incarcerated people, undisclosed immigrants, and the list goes on. So we have to identify that human trafficking is increasingly, and I think it is now the second most significant crime worldwide. It is a major worldwide crime. We give that. And I agree with Tillerson in that clip to that extent. But as I also said,
it's second behind drugs,
yeah, I
believe.
That's right. And I think arms is somewhere there too. They're 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
Major crime. And what it does is it uses a human commodity. And, your earlier clip showing the guy driving the truck, we're making money off of our fellow human beings. And we're doing that every single day.
But it's not only for sex and for profit. I mean, you got 80,000 North Koreans working in China and Russia against their will?
Of course, that's right.
So that if that's happening there, it's happening everywhere.
It is happening everywhere. Remember the 3 words, and we talked about this last I was here. Whenever there's force, fraud, or coercion, there's trafficking. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, look at the landscape in which we live, this highly agrarian landscape of the Central Valley of California. We have an enormous number of people who are being trafficked, both labor, probably primarily, and sex trafficking in this valley.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing that this problem hasn't been fully addressed by Congress, by maybe the previous administration, the current administration, because it's happening. Obviously, and this is not about immigration. This has nothing to do with immigration. It has to do with what's happening to human beings around the globe. So where else is it prevalent besides, say, China? Tillerson mentioned China. They moved down to number 3 as the third tier because they slipped, because they're not addressing the issue and are we addressing the issue the way we should?
No, the quick answer is no. And the other response to your earlier query is this is happening everywhere.
But when you say everywhere, could we mention, I don't know, Greece, Iran, I just throwing out countries, Australia. Is it happening in all these countries?
Yes. So wherever there is, and this is a broad sweeping generalization, wherever there's an imbalance of power, there's human trafficking. And again, work that out. That's everywhere on the globe.
And so, how does it start? Because some of the stories that I've read online, it starts with a young boy or a girl talking online to somebody, and then they meet at Taco Bell or something. I'm just making that up.
Sure.
Okay. And then you pick up the story from them. What happens? How do they get involved in this?
Well, they're you know, the story that's fed to them is that there's a better life for them.
Elsewhere.
There may be an introduction of alcohol and drugs, and before you know it, they're enslaved. And this is enslavement, John. That's precisely what we're talking about. I'm sure the scenarios are different, but I think there's...
Well, this is a generic scenario that we're drawing up here about how it could possibly start. I'm being generic.
Well, I realize that. I mean, I think that people are again, coerced out of their context, and maybe sometimes this
they're
has to do
coerced
with,
out of their environment.
That's right.
Their
That's
current
right.
environment
Yeah.
into another situation, and then all of a sudden they find themselves enslaved or entrapped, and maybe held against their will. Obviously, they're held hostage.
Indeed. Well, and in some cases, this may have to do with young people who are inclined to run away. I wouldn't say that's true for everybody, but it does happen, and then that paves the way for this to occur.
Yeah.
I also want to say this, goes back to my intro, is the most important thing that we can do, and again, this goes back to your show and other shows like this, is to make ourselves aware of what's going on. And I say this everywhere I go, John, is that choosing to be aware, which is always a choice, is a choice not to be complicit. And we are complicit as when we know this is going on and do nothing about it. So we're called to action here. We're called to make a difference.
Is there any chance that, you know, any of us can pinpoint a central location where all this is going on, or is it just, are these just small groups of people, random groups like the one in San Antonio, where it's centered around them? And in California here, we have another group that's centered around them, where these perpetrators are just collecting data on people, entrapping people, and then creating this human traffic line.
Yes.
Is that how it happens,
Well,
or is there one central location where this is happening?
It's a great question, and I wish the answer could be simple, and it's not. So one of the things I said last I was here is that of the top 10 cities in this country where human trafficking is alive and unwell, California has 3 of those.
San Francisco, L.A.
and San Diego.
Okay.
Now, so one might think that, okay, this crime is centralized in those 3 places, but how that translates is a place where we live becomes a major thoroughfare for those 3 cities. And so human trafficking, again, both sex and labor trafficking, are very prevalent in this valley.
But I guess my broader question is are these groups interlinked somewhere? The San Francisco, LA, San Diego, is there one central group that's controlling all of this, or are they separate groups?
I wouldn't think that there would be a central group, but I'm sure that there are networks. I'm sure there are connections, and I know law enforcement works on that premise, but I think there are many networks.
So there isn't one network across the country or across the state. So
not to my
separate.
knowledge. Not to my knowledge.
Yeah, and so is that why it's so difficult to get to the bottom of it, because it's so spread out and widespread?
Well, I mean, I would say anthropologically, one of the reasons it's so difficult to get at it is we'd rather not think about it. We'd rather pretend that it's not there.
Yeah.
And then on top of that is the difficulty and the challenge of actually uncovering it when it occurs. It is not an easy task.
Because it's difficult to, I mean, even that report I ran in the monologue with the 10 people dead, you know, that's difficult to hear, difficult to watch, difficult to digest.
Indeed, yeah.
Is it, so is that part of our problem?
I think so. I think we'd prefer not to think about it. And that's why, as I said earlier, it's so important that we hear those news clips, that we become aware of this crime, and that we're in a position to make a difference and to respond.
Yeah, and what do you do with the perpetrators? I mean, you know, you talk about incarceration, but at the same time, we have to incarcerate the perpetrators.
We do.
At some point, we have to incarcerate them. And do we just throw the book at them?
Well, I think that there has to be a sentence to the crime, and we'll talk about incarceration. You know, I have strong feelings about that as well.
Right.
But I do think that we need to name this as the criminal activity it is, and that those who are involved in it, and we're talking about those who are perpetrating and fostering this crime, and those who are engaged in it. We're talking Johns here, whatever language you want to use. There have to be charges.
If you're a pimp, are you a human trafficker?
Well, so we have to talk about language. when we're talking about human trafficking, we're not talking about prostitution.
We're not.
We're not.
Okay,
We're not.
because?
Well, I mean, for one thing, and I don't remember the age number, John, but in this state, at a particular age, and I don't know if it's 18 or 16, under that age, one's not a prostitute. One's being trafficked.
Right.
So that's a legal standard.
Okay.
But again, it goes back to those three words. If fraud, coercion, or force is involved, this is human trafficking. It is a simple equation.
Wow. All right. Bishop David Rice is here, the Episcopal Diocese of San Joaquin, 436-MeTV option 11. We have an open phone line. As a matter of fact, you can call in and weigh in. The good bishop is here to talk about this and other topics. Back in just a moment.
Not sure what you're watching? Want to see what's coming up next? Or just want to browse what's on without the hassle of flipping channels? Your wish has come true. Now you can view schedules for all the digital TV channels available in the Central Valley. Get local weather updates and forecasts, and listen to nationally syndicated Biz Talk Radio, all on KVHF 4.1. Rescan your TV now, then tune in to digital channel 4.1 to start enjoying the all-new TV guide.
Frigidaire. It means the first electric refrigerator. The first compact electric range. Now, there's the Frigidaire Gallery Range with Symmetry double ovens. It's designed to cook multiple dishes at multiple temperatures, so you can prepare the entire meal at the same time. Frigidaire, over 90 years of legendary innovation.
See the full line of Frigidaire appliances at Ventura TV Electronics and Appliances.
I want to make it clear today that my administration will focus on ending the absolutely horrific practice of human trafficking, and I am prepared to bring the full force and weight of our government to the federal and at the federal level and the other highest levels, whatever we can do in order to solve this horrific problem, getting worse, and it's happening in the United States in addition to the rest of the world, but it's happening in the United States, which is terrible. Human trafficking is a dire problem, both domestically and internationally, and is one that's made really a challenge, and it's really made possible to a large extent, more of a modern phenomenon by what's taking place on the internet, as you probably know. Solving the human trafficking epidemic, which is what it is a priority for my administration. We're going to help out a lot. Solve is a wonderful word, a beautiful word, but I can tell you we're going to help a lot. I'll direct the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, and other federal agencies that have a role in preventing human trafficking to take a hard look at the resources and personnel that they're currently devoting to this fight. Now, they are devoting a lot, but we're going to be devoting more. Dedicated men and women across the federal government have focused on this for some time. As you know, a lot of you have been dealing with the federal government, and it's been much more focused over the last 4 weeks, I can tell you that. I cannot thank each of you enough, and the dedicated men and women who run my staff and your staffs, and getting everybody together was terrific. I was so glad I was able to be here. You start with really a tremendous amount of energy and blood, sweat, and tears. Government can be helpful, but without you, nothing would happen. So, again, I want to thank everybody in this room. It's a very, very terrible problem. It's not talked about enough. People don't know enough about it. And we're going to talk about it, and we're going to bring it out into the open, and hopefully we're going to do a great deal to help prevent some of the horrific, really horrific crimes that are taking place.
All right, that was back in July. Donald Trump, of course, talking about human trafficking and how his administration is going to take the bull by the horns. At this point, earlier we heard from Rex Tillerson. So the national hotline, if you want to get involved, is 1-888-373-7888. Again, 1-888-373-7888. How can people get involved? How can they help besides calling the hotline? What do they do to get involved, David?
Those are great questions. And as you know, as we were offline, we also talked about responses and how you volunteer, etc. So let us go back for a moment. Again, you'd remember 2 years ago, we engaged in what we call the Tour Against Trafficking in my diocese.
Yes.
And you remember, John, what we did is we spent the prior 6 to 9 months in 21 centers up and down the Central Valley showing a film, a documentary, which was a series of interviews of survivors of trafficking. And we engaged in an open forum with CEOs of nonprofits who were working with survivors. We engaged law enforcement, local government, a long laundry list of people to engage in that conversation. So we did that for that 6 to 9 month period. And then we had this wonderful 28-day bicycle tour around the diocese, which was a outward and visible sign of wanting to make a difference in this landscape, but it was also to raise funds for the local agencies up and down our valley who are working to eradicate trafficking. So we raised about $60,000, $70,000, and we've continued that relationship with those agencies over the last 2 years. I'll name 3, and this is endeavoring to respond to your query. There's one called KitKat, which is in Bakersfield. This is Kern County Coalition Against Trafficking. In Fresno, there's Breaking the Chains. In Modesto, Stockton, there's Without Permission. There are 9, 10, 11 others up and down the valley.
I think we've had Breaking the Chains on.
I'm sure you have.
I think we have.
They're doing exceptional work. So again, one of the ways that we can make a difference here is being aware of those agencies.
Donating your time?
Donating time, donating money, because they need both. And become aware of this crime, as we've said.
How do those agencies combat human trafficking? What do they specifically do to combat it? And I ask that only because you know Ashton Kutcher, the actor.
Yes.
Okay, 2.5 Men.
Yeah.
He's pretty famous for that now after he got on that show. So he's created this program where he can actually track down these perpetrators. We'll play that later in the program. So he's actually doing something with his certain vision that he has, the direction that he has with this agency that he created. What are some of these agencies doing to track down some of these people?
Well, first of all, they're involved in liberating someone who's being trafficked.
Yeah, and that's hard to do.
Extremely difficult.
Ooh.
So that it requires law enforcement help, that it requires all sorts of people working together. They're providing refuge, sanctuary for them once they're liberated. And then giving them resources, John, to move on from there, which is a long process because, as you might imagine, again, force, fraud, coercion.
How are those agencies in contact with the victims that are still maybe being held against their will?
Well, again, we prefer not to use the language of victims. We prefer to talk about survivors.
Okay.
Yeah. So once they've been liberated, those relationships continue on.
Okay.
But if we're talking about victims, it's finding them. So a part of what we were talking about is that awareness. If someone sees what one perceives as a non-normative, irregular situation, like, let's say, hypothetically.
You go into a convenience store,
yeah,
and you see something unusual.
Right, you see an older guy with a younger girl, and something doesn't feel right about that.
Yeah.
Then, there may be, that may warrant calling that hotline number and asking some questions and saying something about what you saw.
If the older gentleman doesn't look like he ought to be with this teenager, like if they're not relatives or something, or related, call the hotline.
And think about that. And that also requires that we observe behavior. It's not just like glancing and all of a sudden stereotyping to people. It's watching people relate for a moment, which most of us don't. We sort of go in and do whatever we do and leave. But we need to be open.
Wait a minute. You just said how those two people relate to each other?
Yes. So
okay,
let's stay with that scenario. So there's an older man, a younger girl. We walk into some sort of shop, and we think, that's kind of odd that, they don't really seem to be matching here. And then just sit back and observe them. If there's conversation or not conversation, or you sense anything irregular, then I think it warrants calling that hotline. If nothing else, you ask a question about it.
Yeah, if the teenager seems maybe shy or scared, or what's the other adjective I'm looking to use? Intimidated,
uncomfortable. Yeah. And the other thing that we talk about, and we talked about this last time, is establishments that have barbed wire.
Right.
And one wonders now, why is that wire there? Again, how does that fit Those are the circumstances that we need to be attentive to, and to, again, ask questions of people like who, person the hotline, or some of these nonprofits who are doing this work.
Yeah. So finding what you call the survivors, and they are finding the survivors while they're still in captivity or being held against their will is an enormous task.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And I don't know how that's done. I mean, I know through law enforcement, you said, but is it done sometimes, by online, texting? Maybe one of the survivors gets hold of a cell phone and starts texting or emailing or posting on Facebook or whatever the case. Is that how it works sometimes?
I think it's all the above. I think it's all the above. And going back to the first important population, we do have to come back to law enforcement. Law enforcement needs to be in a position to understand that this is a major crime, and I think ever increasingly they do, and have a willingness to respond. Again, going back to these open forum that we had preparing for the tour, as I said, we had law enforcement there each of those times. And there were a couple of occasions, John, where law enforcement said, well, human trafficking is not a problem here. That's a concern.
Who said that?
Well, again, it was
law enforcement?
A law enforcement person said in one part of our diocese, when we had an open forum, that his view of this was that human trafficking wasn't a problem in that place. And we clearly challenged that. That's a perspective we have to overcome, because we're identifying it happens everywhere. It happens in the major thoroughfares. It happens in cities, towns, cul-de-sacs. This is pandemic. It is a rampant problem and a major crime, as we've identified.
You know where I see a lot of unusual activity sometimes, and you're going to find this hard to believe, it's like at a shopping mall sometimes.
Yeah.
I just see strange behavior sometimes, and I don't think twice about it. I just think, well, it's just people being weird. But
right.
Maybe I should think twice next time
Well, I think we should think twice. And also, again, I alluded to this before, is that we have to acknowledge that we're responsible for one another. Mm-hmm. It is easier, we mentioned this, to assume a position that is, I'm in a silo, I'm responsible for myself, and everything that happens in this world has really nothing to do with me. That's not going to address any of the crimes or the ills that we face in this country and this world if we assume that perspective.
Yeah, I know. And if you take for granted this issue, it's the wrong thing to do, because it's prevalent. It's all over, not only the world, the country, the state of California, the Central Valley. Quickly, before I go to break here, law enforcement here in Fresno, obviously Fresno Police Chief Jerry Dyer, Sheriff Margaret Mims, are they on board with you?
They are.
They are. Talk about that.
Well,
just
I think they're on board, and I would say with me, I think they're on board with supporting the aforementioned agencies. I think they're aware that human trafficking is, again, alive and unwell in this valley, in particular this county and beyond, and I think they're making a difference. There's a long ways to go.
And let me ask you another quick question about the survivors/victims. How do they rebuild their lives once they're freed? How do you... I just can't wrap my brain around that. After being held against your will, let's say for a day, a month, a year, 2 years, how do you come out of that and be okay the rest of your life? Especially if you're a teenager.
Indeed. So think about the language of enslavement. Of those open forum that we had, at each one of those we had survivors tell their stories, which was extraordinary. It was poignant. What we've discovered, and what I've discovered over the years in these conversations, is a high percentage of those who are seemingly liberated from that crime and from being a victim will eventually go back to it.
They will?
Yeah.
Why?
It's what they've known. The traps are always there. There would be a long list of reasons why that happens. But it does happen. And again, that's part of that response. Moving from a place of enslavement to a real place of liberation and staying a survivor is easier said than done.
Wow, that's amazing. All right, Bishop David Rice is here. He is from the Episcopal Diocese of San Joaquin, talking about human trafficking. And you know what? If you've been victimized, if you're a survivor, call in the program. Talk to the bishop here. 436-MeTV, option 11. I would bet almost anything that at some point, everybody in this room has run into somebody somewhere along the line, whether it's at Disneyland, the supermarket, the mall. I'll bet that you've seen someone that's a perpetrator, that's a victim, that's a survivor in that particular situation. And you know what? We didn't even know it, myself included. 436-MeTV, option 11. Back in just a moment.
When you like Ventura TV Appliance on Facebook, it's nice. But when you love the KitchenAid appliances we deliver, it's even better. Our website is cool, and it's a good place to start. But you really should touch the merchandise before you buy. Save big with KitchenAid. Right now, get up to a $1,000 prepaid MasterCard when you purchase select KitchenAid appliances. Get the best selection, price, and service in town without waiting. Come in to Ventura TV Appliance and touch the merchandise today.
The following is another list of things you will not hear on MeTV programs. Man cave, baby bump, whatevs, double half-calf mochaccino, faux hog, redonkulous, totes adorbs, hella, holla, YOLO, cray-cray, and MeTV is still Kardashian-free. This is what you will hear on MeTV programs.
Welcome, Dano. The Twilight Zone. About bulls.
I object, Your Honor.
Mr. Grant.
I hear you right?
You heard me right.
MeTV. Thanks for listening.
While Tom Brady and the Patriots were en route to winning their 5th Super Bowl title, hundreds of men were being arrested for allegedly trying to buy or sell sex. As part of the National John Suppression Initiative involving 30 law enforcement agencies across 15 states, spanning January 18th to February 5th, Super Bowl Sunday, more than 500 sex buyers and traffickers were arrested across the nation. Among the 552 people arrested, those charged include 2 firefighters, a retired police officer, a Houston city employee, a college professor, and 2 Houston school teachers. In Houston, where Super Bowl 50 was hosted, 183 potential buyers and 9 sex traffickers were arrested. One man arrested had his 4-year-old child with him while he tried to purchase sex. Highly regarded baseball agent Randy Hendricks was also arrested for allegedly trying to buy sex. The 71-year-old all-star client list includes baseball great and Texas native Roger Clemens. Due to an influx of visitors, major sporting events such as the Super Bowl is widely considered a hotbed for human trafficking. It's a prime environment that could be used to mask illegal activity in a heavily populated area. But according to a 2011 study, there is no evidence linking an increase in trafficking during major sporting events. Estimates suggest there are more than 20 million human trafficking victims worldwide. 76 victims were freed as a result of the sting operation. For Fox News, I'm Rob Demetrius.
Well, there you have it. So while we were watching one of the greatest comebacks in NFL history by Tom Brady and the New England Patriots, obviously beating their rival and their opponent on Super Bowl Sunday, you had this human trafficking situation going on. And it's very disturbing. And a lot of people have said statistics show that violent crime goes up during the Super Bowl.
Yes.
Especially domestic violence.
That's right.
So is this a shocker? Not hardly, right?
No, it's not.
Not hardly.
Unfortunately. And again, as I was saying offline, I've often heard it said that, the Super Bowl, which is this great gridiron spectacle, is also the Super Bowl of human trafficking. Yeah. And we heard that in those stats during the break.
Yeah. So I want to talk about a lot of other things. We got about 20 minutes left. Let me roll a clip of, and we'll move on to another topic here, but I do want to get some more out of you on this human trafficking issue. Ashton Kutcher, 2.5 Men, the actor, longtime actor, and he developed this program where he can actually track down the perpetrators. And Ashton Kutcher, not too long ago, just within the last couple of months, testified before Congress. And he told Congress about the program that he developed, and it's called Digital Defenders of Children. Here is Ashton Kutcher testifying, of course, in our nation's capital.
I'd like to tell you a story about a 15-year-old girl in Oakland. We'll call her Amy. Amy met a man online, started talking to him. A short while later, they met in person. Within hours, Amy was abused, raped, and forced into trafficking. She was sold for sex. And this isn't an isolated incident. There's not much that's unusual about it. The only unusual thing is that Amy was found and returned to her family within 3 days using the software that we created, a tool called Spotlight. And in an effort to protect its capacity over time, I won't give much detail about what it does, but it's a tool that can be used by law enforcement to prioritize their caseload. It's a neural net. It gets smarter over time. It gets better, and it gets more efficient as people use it. And it's working. In 6 months, with 25% of our users reporting, we've identified over 6,000 trafficking victims, 2,000 of which are minors. This tool is in the hands of 4,000 law enforcement officials and 900 agencies. And we're reducing the investigation time by 60%. This tool is effective, it's efficient, it's nimble, it's better, it's smarter.
All right, so Ashton Kutcher doing his part in trying to track down the perpetrators, helping those survivors. But I do have a caller. I want to put you on hold for a minute, caller. Bishop, I just want to try to pick your brain a little bit about some of the survivors and the victims. And so help me clear this up in my own mind. You said some go back to that lifestyle. Is it like being an alcoholic and falling off the wagon again? Is it like being a drug addict and you're getting off the stuff but you're going back? Is it a need? Is it a lifestyle that you prefer? What is it? Have we been able to pinpoint why they go back to that, why they crave that, why they need it? I don't even know if I characterized it correctly.
Right. No, and language is difficult. I appreciate your acknowledgement at the end there.
I'm struggling, searching for the right words
and this
here.
It is a difficult topic, so we acknowledge that. So first of all, I wouldn't call it a lifestyle. So that's a language thing. I would call it enslavement, as I've already said.
But for some that have been enslaved for years, it becomes a lifestyle, does it not?
It becomes a pattern,
an unwanted
and
lifestyle,
system of life,
right?
To which they become accustomed. It's all someone would know who's a victim in that context. You mentioned drugs and alcohol, so let's talk about that for a moment.
I'm just trying to use that as a comparison so I can wrap my brain around it. It may not be the right comparison.
Well, and it may not be, but what I want to say about it is oftentimes drugs, alcohol are involved in keeping the victim a victim. So you think about someone, a slave, who's being used over 20 times a day for sex.
Oh my God.
Think about that. And one of the ways that perpetrators keep those victims in that context is through drugs and alcohol. So it's not only about breaking a system of which they are a part, but it's about addiction. It's about all sorts of things, John. And I can't answer for that because I'm not in that context. But I've heard enough survivors say that.
And you've talked to these survivors.
Absolutely.
How many have you talked to? Hundreds?
I wouldn't say hundreds, but certainly
enough.
Many. To hear consistent stories that breaking away from that, as hellish as it was exceedingly difficult. Staying away from that, exceedingly difficult. Even acknowledging there was nothing in that was life-giving for them.
What's the common thread with all these survivors, in your judgment?
Well, again, someone who is, I've used those three words constantly, someone who is forced and coerced, and there's fraud, into a life that seems to be, again, initially better than the life they've left, and there seems to be no way out as a result.
That's heartbreaking, seeing this as a way of life better than the one that they left. That is heartbreaking.
Yeah, and day to day. So again, think about some of these numbers that we've used. In this country, between 14,500 and 17,500 people are being trafficked per annum per year. That's cross borders and domestically. Massive numbers.
How about here in the Central Valley?
I don't have those numbers for the Valley, but I know they're high.
All right. Caller, you've been patient. Go ahead. You're on with Bishop David Rice of the Episcopal Diocese of San Joaquin.
Bishop, thanks for being on. I have a question. You said you were not a fan of the wall along the border. How do you feel about sanctuary status in California? And don't you think that there should be some sort of a deterrent, for people to not become victims? In other words, to not come up here in the first place?
Caller, yeah, thank you for your
Thank
question.
you very much. That's a great question.
That's an important question, caller, and this also provides a segue for John and myself, even though we've talked around this. I didn't say that I'm opposed to the wall, but I'll say that now. And that's not simply a political statement on my part. More importantly, caller, it's a theological statement, and it would take us probably some time to dismantle that perspective of mine. But what I do want to say is that I believe that on the borders, we need to be diligent, and let's stay with human trafficking because we're talking about that.
But I want to talk about gun violence and incarceration.
Of course we
too.
do. Of course
and
we do.
We've got some time here.
We have a lot to cover. But also, caller, as I'm saying, is that we need to be diligent and have law enforcement and the other cast of characters diligent in spotting these crimes when they occur. So in that sense, I agree. Border security is crucially important. My earlier comment, though, and I want to come back to this, is that this isn't simply a possible conversation about immigration and walls and border security. This is also majorly a domestic problem. People who their families have been in this country for generations, they are as susceptible to trafficking as people who've come from across the border over the years. And that's why it has to gain our attention and we have to respond. So I hope that goes some distance, caller, in responding to your question.
The caller's gone, but he's listening probably at home.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah, so you're against the wall, but enforcing the current laws that we have on the books on immigration, and maybe having stricter laws on the books.
Right, indeed. I mean, I think that immigration needs to be the hot topic it is. But this goes also down the track of talking about undisclosed immigrants. It talks about DACA recipients, our dreamers. These are conversations, and this is my point here, and part of the reason I say yes to these interviews, is our churches, our people, our faith communities need to be engaged in these conversations across the line. Because, well, from my perspective...
It's mixing church and state, though, is it not?
Yes, my response to that is that this is gospel in the context. I think from my own tradition, being a follower of Jesus, I am called to be aware of the marginalized, those we typically keep invisible in our midst, and to hear their stories and to respond to their plight.
Those that are down on their luck is what you're saying.
All sorts of language attached to that. And I think that one of the most important purposes of the church is to be in that position to make that difference.
Let's segue into incarceration, and we'll get to gun violence. You said in California there's about 120,000 roughly, maybe 112,000 now incarcerated. That figure down from well over 160,000 due to obviously realignment laws in the state of California. What problem do you have with incarceration in your estimation?
Well, so this is a sociological and a theological response. And you've given some figures already. I think the stat I saw last night is it's around 112,000, which is down from 160 from a few years ago. So there's a reduction in numbers, and there are different variables involved in that, as you've cited. I want to go back to my diocese. That community which I've inherited, think about those years of isolationism which I described. My diocese, for the most part, John, hasn't known our sisters and brothers, and I use that language measuredly, who are behind bars. Moreover, we haven't known their support networks, their families. We've offered virtually little care to a large population we have in the Central Valley of California. So as it is with human trafficking, or whatever the issue is, population that we are faced, we need to be aware of that population and figure out what our gospel mandate is in responding to them.
What is it?
Well, my hope is that those who are incarcerated, a significant percentage of those folk will be freed at some stage. What sort of landing are they going to have once they're freed?
Even the hardcore criminals.
Well, I mean, it depends on the crime. It depends on the sentence.
Okay.
But some of those who are behind bars are going to be released. Are they going to carry that felon status the rest of their lives, not be able to get jobs, not to be able to get an apartment, whatever that is? My point is I think the church has to be involved in that conversation and in their lives.
Should every congregation be involved in that?
I think so.
No matter what religion?
Absolutely.
But they're not.
No, they're not. And for some of the reasons we've discussed, it is easier not to know. it is easier to assume a position of they've done this to themselves, they're there, let them live out the life they've led.
It's their own fault.
Yeah, exactly.
Let them lie in the bed they've fixed for themselves.
That's right.
Okay, so that's one way to solve the problem or help alleviate that problem when they come out of prison.
Right.
All right. Gun violence, it's a major thing. And later on, I think I've got a guest here that is going to come back on the program. Hasn't been on for a while. His name is Mike Reynolds. He's the author of 3 Strikes, 10-20 Life laws as well. And I think right now they're trying to water down the 10-20 life. You know, I think if you use a gun, you get 10 years. You pull the trigger on a gun, you get 20. And I think if you kill someone, you get life. That's the law that's on the books. They're looking to water that down. But there is a lot of gun violence. How do you address that problem? Do we just manufacture less guns, make it harder for people to get them? What's the solution? I don't know. I'm no expert, believe me.
Well, and your suggestions, if you will, go down that track a wee bit, and I would say I'm in favor of that. So it's difficult to talk about this and not sound like we're subscribing to some political ideology. There are 93 gun deaths a day in this country. Mm-hmm. I think we would agree, regardless of our political persuasion or even our view of the world, that there's something wrong with that picture.
How do we address the problem without tearing down the right to bear arms?
Well, you know, I think that we should respect the amendments of the Constitution. In this case, I think that's the Second Amendment. Yeah. But I think we have to question someone who has access to an arsenal of weaponry to do what happened recently in Las Vegas. And that,
is it a mental health issue? Is it a gun issue? Is it all of the above? I don't know.
Well, I think in many circumstances it's probably all of the above. And I think these broad sweeping categorizations are difficult to make. But I think that as long as we have access to weaponry, which can do great harm, we need to be engaged in a conversation about cause and effect and how that can be done differently.
Yeah, I think as long as you have access to weapons and you have people that do have mental illness, and they are on the streets, right. Many of them,
right.
Including the homeless. By the way, major problem here in the city of Fresno. A lot of people are against the new ordinance. If you camp overnight, you get arrested, or you go to a shelter. Do you have any issue with that?
Well, I do. And one step back before we do that.
Go ahead.
I'm engaging with folk who are connected to the NRA. I'm having conversations with folk who are serious about the Second Amendment.
Yes.
And I've said countlessly that from my perspective, this is not about taking somebody's gun. This is about gun responsibility. This is about acknowledging that we have a major problem in this country and it needs to be addressed. And I think it's going to take everybody together to do that.
What's their response? Are they okay?
Well, sometimes they don't want to engage in conversation because they think that this is all about, you know, challenging their Second Amendment. But it needs to be a bigger conversation than that. This is about human life.
Yeah. What is your church? I know you said you're involved with these various organizations. You're donating money, human trafficking, the agencies that go after these perpetrators. They try to help the survivors. What else is your church involved in and doing to help our society today?
You mentioned, John, our sisters
your diocese,
and brothers.
I should say.
Thank you. Our sisters and brothers who live on the streets. I mean, as I said in my opening comment, it astounds me living in an agricultural belt as we do that we have so many people living on the streets.
But it's not only Fresno.
No, it's not. Oh, no.
It's all over.
It is everywhere. It is everywhere. So a couple of quick responses, and then I'll offer a commentary. I don't know how we're doing on time.
Quick call here, but go ahead. I'll put this call on
and
hold
this is a simple response.
Hang on, caller.
A simple response. In my first year here, I bought for the diocese about 5,000 of those cloth backpacks that you see kids have with the strings. And I invited local Episcopal communities to fill those backpacks with items they think that people in the streets might be able to use. We've been distributing those backpacks for the last 3.5 years.
It's amazing.
So,
how many?
Oh, thousands.
Thousands.
So you drive along the streets of Fresno and Clovis, and you'll see someone pushing a trolley or on a bike with one of those backpacks.
That's the diocese, the Episcopal diocese.
It is.
Okay, caller. I think you may have called before, but go ahead.
Well, the only reason I'm called again is because I'm surprised nobody else called in. But I just wanted to read one really quick little passage. The path of the righteous man is beset on all sides by the inequities of the selfish and the tyranny of the evil men. Blessed is he who in the name of charity and goodwill shepherds the weak through the valley of darkness, for he is truly his brother's keeper and the finder of lost children. And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger those who would attempt to poison and destroy my brothers. And you will know my name is the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon thee. And I appreciate having your guest, the bishop, but I can tell you what, this guy is liberal, the left side of liberal. And I don't understand why he is mixing politics with church. I believe in faith-based solutions, but I think he's really delving in to some areas that there should be a separation. Thank you again for your show.
Okay, thank you, caller, for your perspective. And I think you got about a minute and a half left to respond to the caller who's
well, quick response. First of all, I
I
appreciate the scripture, and and I agree with completely because it is about justice. I don't think we can talk about justice and not engage in justice, and I don't think that's political. I think it's gospel. So that's my quick response to this. Whether we're talking about again any of the issues that we've touched on today.
Yeah, so the church should be involved in helping people no matter what the cause, no matter what the problem, is what you're saying.
The church has to be involved, John, in people's lives wherever they are. And if we want to...
Not just when things are going well.
Absolutely. Yeah, correct. That's right.
Yeah, I heard somebody say the other day, hey, don't start praying when something happens. Do it now before it happens so you're covered.
Well,
am I right about that?
Well, you are.
Is that right?
And
is that a good thing?
I'll add to that. I may have used this
really
quote
quick. I think we got 30 seconds.
So I can do it in 30 seconds. Pope Francis, who I think is a lovely rock star, and I mentioned this last time, has said, we pray for the hungry, we feed them, and that's how prayer works. Yeah. We have to respond as people of faith across ecumenical lines to make a difference in our world.
All right. Good to see you again, and come back again sooner.
Thank you.
It's been 2 years since I've seen you, but you look great. All right, thank you. It's the good Bishop David Rice, the Episcopal Diocese of San Joaquin. We thank him for his time. Tomorrow, we've got Rusty Parker. She's a chiropractor, and on Friday, David Mugridge. Have a good day.